Hey everyone, so One Piece chapter 1010 just came out, and I am obviously very happy because a major theory of mine was just confirmed, which is that Conqueror's Haki, not armament, but Conqueror's Haki, is the key to defeating Kaido and has been all along. I've made a couple theory videos in the past about this, both from Zoro's end and from Luffy's end. And yeah, I understand. Obviously saying that Zoro was going to get Conqueror's Haki, that on its own is not a crazy theory. A lot of people wanted Zoro to get Conqueror's Haki. But I came at it from the angle that Wano in general was ultimately going to be about Conqueror's Haki, and that would be the power-up that is most important, and that is why this is the arc that fits for Zoro to get it. And more importantly, from Luffy's angle, at a time that everyone believed that Armament Haki was the setup that Luffy was getting in terms of growth to be able to defeat Kaido, I said that no, that is clearly a stepping stone, and that clearly things are building towards Conqueror's Haki being the final key ingredient Luffy needs to be able to defeat Kaido. And I understand. It's easy to believe that armament is what would be needed to beat Kaido because that's what characters have been saying over and over. You need armament, you need Ryo, you need to get to that second level where you can damage Kaido's scales. I get that, but that's where analysis comes in, where you're not just looking at what characters are telling you is the next step, but actually looking at the ideas throughout the arc to get a hint at what things are actually building up to and what is actually going to be important for a character's growth by the end of the arc. And in that sense, you can actually look back further at the Act 2 analysis that I did of Wano, where I talked about the themes as I saw them, and a major theme that I talked about towards the end that it looked like was being set up was the growth that you would need in order to become a conqueror, the theme of what it takes to become a king, and that's where I started getting the idea that Conqueror's Haki would essentially be the key to defeating Kaido. So, people have told me that Morge, do more analysis, don't do theories, but you have to understand that lots of times if you do analysis well, then it can lead to some really good theories because things don't just happen out of the blue. The author is going to be trying to match the theme of the story to the growth that characters get. So in this case, I think that is a win for analysis and theory crafting as well. And then on the flip side, sometimes you have theories that don't have a lot of analysis that go into them that don't pan out, like say certain teapots, but we're just not going to talk about that here. So anyways, as for the chapter itself, we got a lot of hype moments. A lot of them were spoiled for me because I guess people in their excitement to tell me that I was right about Conqueror's Haki, a lot of people on Twitter and in YouTube comments and stuff were basically letting me know exactly what happened in this chapter much earlier in this week. So a lot of it didn't come as a surprise to me, but it was still cool to see. Starting with, obviously, Kid and Killer splitting off to go fight Big Mom. I don't know whether or not that actually is going to be the final matchup. I'm going to have a video coming out about that later on this week. I have a couple of videos actually coming out from this chapter because this chapter gave us so much juicy material to talk about. So I'm just going to leave that be. I don't know if that's going to be their final matchup or that's actually going to be playing out from start to finish. With Zeus, I'm glad that it's being kind of acknowledged that Zeus has kind of been a bum, from start to finish. The most impressive he was when we were first introduced to him, causing bad weather in Whole Cake Island. But kind of ever since then, he's not been that useful for Big Mom. So I do like the notion that Big Mom is, from what it looks like, about to create, a new homie that is maybe a little more formidable, a little more Prometheus-esque rather than Zeus. Because Zeus obviously has a lot of firepower. Well, not literally, he has lightning. But Zeus has a lot of, combat power, but it's just in terms of personality, he's not quite got that edge that Prometheus does. So if Big Mom has two homies like that, that would make her just generally a more formidable opponent, which would be really interesting to see. Now, what interests me is what Law said, which is that he didn't want... So Zoro complains to Law that Law saved him. Law's logic was that, well, I didn't want to do this plan if it involved one of us dying. So I do wonder a little bit about that. I want to see the official translation, but I want to know if this was purely a sentimental reason that Law gave, which would be kind of sweet that, we're going to execute this plan, but we're going to make sure that we all come out alive. Or if this was more a pragmatic decision, which was that, no, we need every fighter, so the plan isn't worth it if we actually lose a fighter in the process. I like to think it's the first one and that this is just Law being a bit of a softie, but it's also very possible that it's the second one, or maybe a bit of both, so we'll see. Now, Law did break out a new ability, which was Curtain, right? As my understanding, it's called Curtain. Makes sense. Operating room, more operating room abilities. Oda can really do whatever he wants with Law's abilities and kind of just give him something new because the operating room, you can kind of just throw in whatever, scalpel, knife, injection shot. There's so many, random abilities that you can include in there. Now Curtain, there's just so many random things that you can kind of just throw in and say, okay, this is now part of Law's ability because it it ties in some way to something that's going on in an operating room. So it's just funny to me that that's also the only new ability that Oda has showcased for Law throughout this arc. So I do feel that Law as a character, I think combat-wise, he hasn't actually grown that much since Dressrosa. That's just the feeling that I've gotten, because he just hasn't busted out anything really new besides Curtain, which is a purely defensive ability. I think just out in general, Law has definitely felt like very much a support character throughout this fight. And that's just interesting to see, because Law's such a broke character on paper that I think Oda writing him more like a support type does kind of help temper our expectations for how those broke abilities will be used. Besides that, that's just like a bit of a tangent, because I don't think I've commented that much on Law in general throughout this fight. But that aside, the two major big moments we got were, one, Zoro using Ashura for the first time, and two, Luffy having this sort of awakening or understanding of what is actually needed to defeat Kaido, which is Conqueror's Haki. So, Zoro using Ashura for the first time, this was such a long time coming. It was almost I never believed that Zoro was not going to break out Ashura again. I know that some people had started to say that maybe he just doesn't, this was like, a two-time ability that he used pre-time skip, and now post-time skip he doesn't have that anymore. But it just felt so wrong, because it felt like the best tool that Zoro was starting to develop pre-time skip, to say that he just didn't develop that any further post-time skip or during the training, it would just feel like such a wasted opportunity. So far from what we've seen, Ashura has only come out in really big, important moments, such as obviously against Kaku, which was Zoro's most difficult opponent in the series up to that point so far. Definitely his highest level 1v1, I believe, that he got pre-time skip. And then the next time was against Kuma, which was a life or death, or Pacifista, which was a life or death situation. And now finally we're getting it again against Kaido, which is again a life or death situation. So it does feel like Zoro really, that's his finishing move, is really big, that's his big gun, his final attack, etc., etc. I'm glad that it finally came back out to play. It does also suggest to me that it's not, even through the training he did with Mihawk, it's not something that maybe he can use freely. It maybe still might remain, as he was using a pre-time skip, as a sort of, pseudo power-up, but more so as a finishing move rather than something he will use for an extended period of time in battle. I do have more to say on that, and that will also be a video topic that's coming out next week, but that's at least what it looks like at the moment. So, that being said, Zoro actually managed to get, with Ashura, because we've already seen, in base form or whatever, Zoro has been able to damage Kaido, so the fact that Ashura is what it takes to actually leave a scar on him, like Oden did, tells us a lot about what Conqueror's Haki can actually do. Because if armament, Zoro, the implication was that he was, through Enma, already able to use that next level of armament Haki, but for the same reason I assume that the Scabbard's attacks on Kaido were too shallow, Zoro's attacks would also be too shallow to actually leave a scar on Kaido with just using armament Haki. But if he's able to use Conquerors, that basically opens a whole new world, in that Conquerors is what's needed to damage monsters, I assume, like Kaido and Big Mom, to a severe degree, actually injure them, actually threaten their life. We know that when Oden cut Kaido, we now understand that he was using Conqueror's Haki, and that's why there's such a difference between when the Scabbards all attacked Kaido at once versus when Oden hit him just once with one big move, and that alone had Kaido not just scarred, but essentially, I wouldn't say on his deathbed, but really down and almost looking, down and out of it if Oden had managed to get in that finishing blow. So obviously Zoro wasn't able to damage him in that same manner, where now Kaido's just down and potentially Zoro could just finish him off if he, as long as there's no outside interference, as we saw with Oden. But at the same time, you could also argue that maybe Kaido's gotten stronger since then. I don't want to just jump the gun and say that, okay, Zoro's as strong as Oden now, but it's possible. Maybe you can make the argument that when Zoro is using Ashura, that he's up there. So it's difficult still to scale certain characters from past and present, because it's hard to tell how much, let's say, Kaido has improved, whether he has improved. I do think the implication has been that Kaido has improved. Personally, that's my interpretation. Or what Zoro is able to do with Ashura, if he's able to get in some more attacks with Ashura. Right now it's a one-off for him, but maybe Zoro has to be fighting an Ashura for an extended period of time to really put him at that, that top tier level that a lot of people are hoping that he'll be at by the end of the series. So just if you're a Zoro fan, this was probably a really, really great chapter for you. I do like that it was acknowledged that, you know, that attack that happened last chapter did break most of the bones in his body. It did seem like he kind of just brushed that off, even though they made a big deal of how damaging it was. It did seem like that was kind of ignored when he went after Prometheus, but I like the fact that it's being acknowledged that, no, that's just Zoro being Zoro. He's a damaged tank, so even though he shouldn't be fighting right now, he still is. But it does look like for the moment, that's the last hit that he's getting in against Kaido. It was a really good one. I think everybody would have hoped that if he was to get a really big moment against Kaido, it would be through Ashura, so that was very satisfying to see. It would have been more satisfying if people hadn't spoiled me about it, but, you know, it is what it is. But then the next big moment came from Luffy, right? So, I've got a lot of thoughts on this. I feel like I need to go back and reread everything that's happened in the rooftop fight from start to finish to kind of get the flow of how things developed. At the moment, one, it feels similar to when, weirdly enough, it feels similar to several different spots. So one, it feels weirdly enough similar to when Luffy first started getting hits in on Doflamingo that were making him bleed, I guess, post Gamma Knife. Okay, so it felt similar to that. I think the attacks were almost similar. I think that there was like a uppercut. I think there was a blow to the stomach. It feels very similar that suddenly Luffy's able to make this guy bleed. Obviously with Doflamingo, it was through the Gamma Knife. But it just feels, I don't know, it just feels like an interesting little callback. I don't know if it is. I would have to compare the panels. But two, it also feels similar to Luffy damaging Crocodile. I know that Crocodile, when Luffy first managed to hit him, that's more similar to Luffy hitting Kaido with Red Rock when he first arrived. But it does feel similar in the sense that now Luffy's actually learned the trick, like the real trick to actually being able to hit Kaido. Maybe you could compare it more to when Luffy had blood and started hitting Crocodile, and Crocodile was shocked at how Luffy was able to hit him even without water. I don't know, it does feel similar to a few other moments in the series where it feels like Luffy suddenly figured something out or something has changed, and now Luffy is able to actually damage the opponent. So, that being said, how do I feel about how this all played out? One, in general, I really appreciated that this entire chapter was paced out a little less, or at least the paneling was a little less busy, right? Like, you had less stuff going on each page. So, through that, the pacing of the chapter allowed for moments to just last or you to feel the effect of certain moments a little longer. So I like the fact that when Luffy was getting his hits in on Kaido, Oda was devoting fairly large panels and large page space towards these moments to just let us kind of get that action play out. So I do feel like the hype of the moment is strong just because of the way that Oda did it. I do like the fact that, you know, Luffy's resolution has, it seems to have jumped up a few notches over the course of this chapter. I do need to kind of just reread from start to finish this rooftop section because does this feel a little too abrupt to me? I don't know. Because with, let's say, Future Sight, Luffy's process of learning Future Sight, there were many levels to it. First, us being told that this Future Sight ability exists, us getting several showcases of it with Katakuri. Then, over the course of that battle, Luffy slowly starting to realize that, okay, we saw Luffy getting the motivation to, I want to learn how to do this too. We saw the struggle Luffy had to go through to kind of slowly in bits and pieces start being able to access Future Sight, till finally he was able to do it against Katakuri, and that was a very long, drawn-out process. With this Conqueror's Haki moment, it's hard to say because I did enjoy the moment, but at the same time, I don't know if I read everything from start to finish, this rooftop battle from start to finish, how would I feel about Luffy suddenly being able to access probably the strongest ability in the entire series over the course of, like, you know, a few pages. Just suddenly Luffy getting up and saying, I understand it now. And then us being explained what this power-up is and that Luffy has it. The reason I'm saying I have to read it all in one flow is because, again, people had spoiled for me that this happened, so I was prepared for it. So I didn't find it abrupt when it happened because I already knew it was coming. So because I'd been spoiled for it, I don't know if I got gotten, if I was able to personally gauge for myself how I feel about this moment. I was just able to enjoy it for what it was, which was a hype Luffy moment. So, all that being said, I do think that this is, you know, a setup for a 1v1. It does look like. I've been saying I want a Luffy versus Kaido 1v1 for a while. that doesn't mean that I don't want, you know, some team involvement or team effort and everything like that. We got that, but I did want the battle to come down to a 1v1. And with Luffy saying at the end of the chapter, okay, you guys go downstairs, it does feel like the setup is there for that. Kid and Killer are currently occupied with Big Mom. Whether or not that plays out remains to be seen. I guess on paper it does seem like that's their matchup and they're going to get that. But yeah, just the fact that Luffy is going to get, at least on paper, it does seem going forward, he's going to get to be fighting Kaido 1v1 on the rooftop by himself. That is a very exciting setup. Luffy has not yet busted out Gear 4th, so we don't get to yet see what Gear 4th with Conqueror's Haki, this new revelation of Conqueror's Haki, looks like. It's probably going to be pretty crazy. We might even get to see some sky splitting or something like that. I don't know. I do think that a Kaido flashback is yet to come. Sorry, should have phrased that better. I do think that a Kaido flashback is soon to come, just because it's something that the villains as of late have been getting. Doflamingo, Big Mom. It does seem necessary for Kaido's character because there's just multiple things that Oda has kind of hinted at about his past, this fish fruit, starting with rocks and everything like that have yet to be fleshed out. I just think that a Kaido flashback is definitely coming, and I definitely think it's going to be a mid-battle flashback. You guys might be doubting, you know, the raid failing and everything like that based on Luffy's determination towards the end of this chapter, but I still don't know. I still don't know, and I'm still going to stick by, I believe that at this point in time, if I had to bet money, I would bet that the raid fails. We have yet to get the Kaido mid-battle flashback. The fact that there's a flashback waiting for Kaido is bad news for Luffy, because that's probably going to be a good thing for Kaido if he gets a mid-battle flashback rather than for Luffy, because that suggests that there's going to be a second win for Kaido. We've still not seen his hybrid form. And on top of that, just the fact that Luffy has had this sort of determination before. You can go back and reread chapter 199 and compare it to this chapter, and then you can still see the result that happened. I do think it would be to me, it's just very important that Luffy suffers a failure here, because beating Kaido with Conqueror's Haki without ever actually having to, like, really struggle this arc, like his initial defeat was, he bounced back from that pretty much immediately. Without seeing Luffy actually have to really struggle and almost have his spirit broken this arc, and then kind of just come away with it with him immediately being able to pick up on this new, possibly most powerful power-up in the entire series and just succeed, I do not think I would like that. I would have to wait and see how it plays out, but I do think that there just probably is more coming. I think that there is more coming in terms of struggle for his character, and I do think that, you know, he might have Kaido on the ropes next chapter, a couple chapters down the line. I do think that a Kaido flashback is coming after that, and if I had to guess, then hopefully the tables probably turn right after that. So that's all for this video. If you enjoyed, then definitely like, comment, and subscribe, and you can support me on Patreon to get extended thoughts on this and all future topics.